Hello and welcome to today's episode of It's a Numbers Game. I'm Adam Morris, and leading the conversation is my co-host, the ever insightful Daniel Welling. Today, we dive into the challenges of modernising legacy line of business applications. Perhaps, like me, you've had clients with weird bespoke applications, and it's always been a single point of failure that's kept you and the client awake at night, or bespoke software that just needs an upgrade or replacement. Today, we dig in to how you can turn this around into an opportunity. So let's get right to it.
Ben, welcome along.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. And I guess for those of our listeners that don't know how you and I know each other, we're a result of Tech Tribe networking, aren't we? That's how we got to know each other.
Absolutely. I think I found you, Daniel, via Eventbrite.
Probably not the time to say that we don't use Eventbrite anymore for the Tech Tribe meetings, but nonetheless, it served a purpose. So Ben, today we're tackling a pretty important topic for MSPs, which is line of business applications that disrupt the MSP's ultimate ambition and objective of modernising infrastructure for their clients. And we've had some fascinating conversations at Tech Tribe meetings, which we felt we wanted to share to the wider podcast audience. So an MSP is talking to you about they've got a client, they're Microsoft 365, they're using modern infrastructure, endpoints, networking. The last problem they've got though in their environment is this 100-year-old server in the corner running a bit of software that everyone's petrified of, and a box that's covered in cobwebs, and it's a significant risk for the client, and they want to help their clients, but they don't know how. They're not software developers. So cue Ben.
Well, okay, thanks for the question. So I think my personal point of view is I always try to put myself in the shoes of the clients. So this legacy application and these dated servers on premises, they're still there for a reason. Now, quite often we find that clients have been patching and trying to maintain and keep on top of these things for years and years. And it's really important to figure out why they're bothering doing that. So, as we say, they are a risk. And more often than not is that the applications there reside on these systems are business critical still in one way, one form or another. And as we know in technology, it's difficult to keep pace with things. And today's world is cloud or Microsoft 365, but there's still huge amounts of power residing in these legacy platforms, legacy applications, business critical systems, and the data / insights that are there. So they can be a real pain to move. So the way we'd approach it is to try and sort of break the big problem down into smaller rocks. So trying to figure out what does the application actually do, and then decide, well, can we replicate that in using modern infrastructure? And what is its power? What is its value for the business? Does it need modernizing? So it can play nicer with more other applications and current infrastructure, or maybe the application itself doesn't need to be there, but it's the data. But the data's in bizarre formats, really difficult to extract and transform and then load it into another application. So it's about breaking down the bigger problem into small problems and then trying to deal with those smaller problems individually. Quite often, if it's that old, modernizing it might be a real challenge, but we've done it many times. And, you look at banks and financial services companies, they still have powerful applications written in the 80s that are still kicking on. I spoke to someone recently who works actually in the defense sector, and there's some applications using Oracle Forms now, still maintained and, widely respected, but Oracle's moving in a different direction. So what do you do with these applications? So That's where I would start. Really think about the client, why they've still got it, and then breaking it down as to, is it the data that's valuable? Is it the functionality? What is it? And then see whether you modernize, rebuild, replicate in some other way to play nicely with, modern architectures.
And I wonder how many quick fixes haven't actually been thoroughly followed up. So the first problem is the hardware with that ancient server. So, if there's a way of just virtualizing that and then moving it to a new host on premise or somewhere else in the cloud, and then stopping there, can we recover the server? Is there support for the application still from a third party? How regularly do you come across those sorts of scenarios where you've got like no instruction manual, no form of contact, or are you normally in a position where there's some form of support to soften the blow for you?
Yeah, well, obviously, topically, a lot of the time it's the IT support companies in the MSPs that bring us in at this point. You are, and they are the experts with networking and physical and cloud infrastructure. We're very good at those things, but we're more on that software application level. So quite often the challenge is not so much that side of things, but trying to reach the original developers, or even if they are unreachable, which is, developers move on, they move to different companies. Sadly, we've encountered that they have passed away, and for whatever reason, and they could be super intelligent as well. And that adds a layer of complexity because their code is very niche and it's very, it does some brilliant stuff, but unraveling it takes a lot of time. We work with the clients they've worked with large sets of geophysical data, and they've got multiple bespoke applications designed for different hardware, and now more recently designed to be, cloud native. And even though we did have access to this person, it's still very difficult to reverse engineer what's going on first before you can even affect a change. Fortunately, if you have access to these people, it makes it a lot more possible. If you don't, then look, nothing's impossible. It just takes a bit longer, and then it comes into the equation of whether or not the value's there and it is worth the cost.
Thanks for that, Ben. And that's just, I thought it just entered my head here, because one of the key things I used to advise clients around around bespoke software is always the support component. Who's providing, okay, someone's going to write it, but then how's it going to be supported? Are they going to support it, or is a third party going to support it? What happens if they don't want to support it anymore? Who then supports this software? So how do you tackle that solution for your clients around that kind of guarantee around longevity, for decades potentially? Because for me, that would be one of the central questions to ask. How can we ensure this software is still going to be fit for purpose in 10 years' time and have the ongoing support?
Yeah, well, firstly, we would suggest choosing your right IT support partner. So obviously those sorts of things is definitely more in their wheelhouse, and quite often in these scenarios, we're working side by side with them. If there isn't one, then, we take on cloud hosting support and maintenance of the products.
And in particular, I guess I was meaning around software code, the code support, the updates, the patching, bug fixing.
I think, again, for the way we do it, it's not everybody's cup of tea. The way we do it is to provide options. I think it's about making the client aware of what options there are to support it. And in the future, they may want to bring it all in-house. So, it's about opening their eyes as to how to build a team, how to have a handover, or if they're not building in-house, if there's IT support partners, MSPs available, if it's companies like CCQ Tech that build the software or then, transition the support of their legacy systems into our hands. It's about having the, solid enough contracts and making sure that you're on hand to do that. Probably in the similar world as you guys, we have monthly rolling contracts to make sure that, it's a pre-purchasing time up front, so that we are always on hand to jump in if there is a big problem that's happened. Maybe Microsoft's done a big update, some APIs have broken. You just make sure that your software partner has hived off the resource to make sure that they're available in good time but more importantly, to actually make sure that the errors don't happen in the first place, to see updates coming, to see problems coming, and proactively put measures in place so that so things don't break.
And presumably, part of your business model as well is that ongoing support for whatever software you write. So there's some ongoing recurring monetization, I suppose, of that solution.
That is an option that we can have, absolutely. And again, it's before we build it, we often say, if we're going to embark on this project, who is going to support it and how would you like it to happen? If you do it with us, these are the pros and cons. If you do it with somebody else or yourselves, this is what could happen.
And I guess one of the aspects there that I think Adam was getting to was, do you write this in some random platform or code that that is less widely adopted, and therefore there's fewer or higher priced skill sets available to support it? So is this SQL.net? Like everyone supports that, right? So no worries there, or is this something quite random? And as well as I think the interesting point there about who is going to do this? Do you want to do it internally, or do you want a third party to do it? And so is that sort of a common discussion point around what the platform should be?
If they're in the know, it might be. A lot of our clients may be new to bespoke software development, or are looking to re-platform, modernize their existing apps, and don't know much about this arena. We have a preferred stack of technologies, typically the Microsoft stack, which is C#, .NET, but we use lots of different open source technologies, and it is, for us, it's important to use the ones that itself are going to be the most supported, because these applications are typically complex in nature. They do typically have APIs, so there's a flow of data two ways, synchronization between one or more applications. Using unusual code bases or frameworks can naturally land you in more hot water than anything else. So it makes sense to stick with the Microsoft stuff. And one of our clients wanted to develop a bespoke two-factor authentication, a multi-factor authentication system, using email, text messages, these sorts of logins that we're sort of quite familiar with now, which is fine. They really wanted to have all the code as newly built as possible, and not using Microsoft standard OICD for multi-factor authentication, which is absolutely fine. The challenge with that is maintaining it is a lot harder, because we take the latest security protocols from Microsoft, and more often than not, they're automatic updates. If you're doing things truly bespoke, and then you've got to really keep your finger on the pulse and maintain it, and that requires more time and energy from developers, which increases the cost. So yes, I think it makes sense to use industry standard and well-respected tech stacks.
And then there's stacks and there's platforms. So again, just listening to you talk, I'm then thinking, well, where does something like Dynamics come into this? Because actually, don't be at the code level, be at the platform tool level, and then you're another step up the value chain, if that's the right phrase. Do you do that? And how is that something you embrace?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, I mean, those sorts of questions we would typically suggest a technology discovery project. These are designed because most people don't really know the best solution. Do we go bespoke? Do we go off the shelf? Do we get something like Dynamics in, which is a really all singing, all dancing platform, which has tremendous potential to supercharge a business? But there's risks and there's costs, and people want to understand what they're getting into. So the discovery projects can be very different from client to client. But if we're looking at something like that, again, it's about, well, what are we trying to achieve? What do you have there already? What do your customers use, and what do they expect? Does that come into it? So it's about just doing a good amount of work, trying to understand the client, their objectives, but also their business domain. How much does that come into it? And not every industry may, work as well with something like Dynamics as another. And then if you're looking at things like Dynamics and Microsoft, then, why not Oracle? Why not IBM? And these sorts of things. So it's about really marrying up business domain, the challenges and the objectives, and then just going out and doing some work and putting that experiential lens onto it. You mentioned legacy systems, Windows 2000 servers on premise. We talk a lot about the cloud, loads of buzzwords, which is great. But over the last 20 years that we've been in business, we've moved things have moved on so much. So you really need a good level of experience to see what can happen, what can go wrong, and try to avoid these things. So you got to put that experiential lens onto it and surface those options, and then ballpark what each option will take to bring about, and then give the client those options, and be as visible and clear as it can be.
We're going to take a quick break whilst I quickly introduce MSP Finance Team, the hosts of this podcast. You started your MSP to help business owners master technology. Isn't it time you were rewarded for that? MSP Finance Team helps hard-working MSP owners finally get the profit, time, and control they deserve. With better financial and strategic insight, you can make better decisions, leading to more control, profit, and time. Our approach is unique. We focus exclusively on MSP businesses, and we meld bookkeeping, CFO as a service, accounting, and mentoring to help you get started, scale, or sell. We bring you the freedom to focus on what's important, whether it's growing your business strategically or enjoying spontaneous moments with your family. So visit mspfinanceteam.com today and take the first step towards financial mastery. Because when it comes to your MSP finances, it's not just business, it's a numbers game. I was just trying to think of what you do through the lens of most of our listeners, so the MSP owners out there. What's the best way for them to work alongside you on a project, if at all? What tips would you have, or how would you prefer to work with the local IT guys, whether it's the internal team or whether it's outsourced? What's the recipe for success there?
I think, how to build trust, really. Both of our industries is massively reliant on earning the trust of our clients. And if MSPs are exploring relationships with developers, that trust needs to be earned on both sides. So I would start there and try and understand, again, how each other work, whether you even like each other, whether there are projects that you could potentially collaborate upon. There may not be. And there's the world of software applications and IT is massive, and we all have our sort of speciality. So I'd really look at the relationship between the two. But then also I'd be looking at the market, a lot. From what I understand, it's the same with us. We always try and understand is how we can add and bring more value to our clients. And that's, it's not just about building applications. So I think when it comes to MSPs and software developers, it's about saying, how can the software development company add value to the MSP clients, and how can you collaborate to bring those proposals, sometimes maybe even unasked, to the clients and saying, listen, we've been looking at your industry, we know your business because we've been working together for so long. And we think there's a couple of potentials here, maybe you'd like to explore them.
And I think from my perspective, thinking back to my days, account managing clients, writing roadmaps, I'd be looking down the estate, making observations and recommendations for what they should do. And line of business application, unsupported, we don't know anything about it, we think this is a big risk. And then I'd have a big blank space, like I don't want to get sucked into this. So actually having something standard that I can sell, that the client can buy. And I think that's to your previous point about having a discovery. So if there is a workshop that I can propose, and it is for all intents and purposes a generic, unbiased approach, as you say, with applying some experience to really assess what the options are. If that's a set price, or some way of me easily calculating it, so that I can then go and talk to the client and know that I can then come back to you with, here's the attributes you told me to confirm, and there's the price, and I've agreed that price with them. Over to you, Ben, to deliver.
Absolutely right. And I think that reminded me, Daniel, when we spoke a year or two again, to actually package this up as such. And I created one specifically for IT support companies and MSPs, and I think I even popped it onto the Tech Tribe portal. But it's a good point, because with our shared client base or our shared audiences or shared market, we constantly need to remind ourselves that they rely on us to help them with technology choices. They rely on us to, solve their problems through technology and to really understand what they're trying to do. And these discovery projects are aimed to provide all parties with insights, different options, and to estimate the scale. And they only really take a couple of days. So you mentioned your workshops. Our average number of workshops for a discovery project is three 2-hour workshops. So easy to put a low price tag on it and then create that goodwill with the client and then leave it to them as to what they want to do next, and they feel comfortable that they are informed appropriately.
Yeah. And even just an educational piece would be useful as like a precursor to that. So here are the different types of option. You've got an off-the-shelf product, you've got a platform such as Dynamics, there's a fully bespoke, and there's various flavors of that from ultra rare to industry standard, and here's the kind of full process that you need to go through to work out what the likely needs are. Yeah, it sort of folds back into that know, like, and trust stages of building that relationship. So,
Yeah, I mean, I'm just seconding that, because sort of filling the gap between the MSP's understanding and the client's understanding around the software landscape, the pros and cons of all of the different approaches. And, unless you have come from a software developing background, if you're an MSP owner, the chances are this is fairly alien. And also you don't want to lose sight of what your main skill set is. And it's not software. Once you start digging into all this other world, you can unravel very quickly and become quite messy, I think. So I think that sort of being able to position someone like yourself to come in from an educational perspective and just talk about the opportunities, how it could look, what's the upfront cost, what's the ongoing costs, what are the risks, how long would it take, and provide that kind of additional piece of educational expertise. I think there's a real asset there actually for MSPs to be able to offer that as some kind of service.
I appreciate that totally. And what I'd add to that as well is, I don't know whether, businesses have been indoctrinated possibly by the powerful sales and marketing mechanisms from corporate companies, big tech companies, but you don't have to invest in a big solution all at once. We typically, off the back of a discovery project, we would recommend a proof of concept project. So rather than a couple of days of discovery where not only are you surfacing options, but you're really gaining that trust, you can then move on to a proof of concept or a prototype project where, again, you're trying not to break the bank, only investing a few weeks of work, but either building something really small or in some other way proving that the concepts you're trying to introduce is going to work. And again, it doesn't always involve bespoke software. So if we're looking at Dynamics, if we're looking at Salesforce and all these other things, it's like, why wouldn't we? These are tried and tested, amazing pieces of kit, amazing technology. Why wouldn't we bring them on board? Well, one of them is, do they play nicely with our other systems? Are we going to be ending up with people doing things their own way and then just downloading data from one system into a spreadsheet and putting it up into another one? So I think it's really, in my world, that software world, involving the users, involving people at each step's really important. So before companies are looking to invest in big platforms or anything really, maybe embark on a proof of concept or a prototype project which looks to tackle the low-hanging fruit. Let's do something impactful so we can prove that introducing this functionality is going to be used, or it's actually going to have the impact that we want. We prove that two systems can talk to each other before going to the next step. And a lot of businesses may not have thought about this sort of step-by-step, gather the information, get your KPIs all there and rectify your theories before push a go on. And often as well, obviously, if we get big senior directors coming in from company, other companies, so they're new in the role, they're operations directors or finance or CTOs or whatever it is. They have a way of doing things, and they often come with their own ideas and beliefs, which is absolutely fine. But perhaps what they know and like may not be appropriate, and maybe they just want to test things step by step to see if they're making those right choices.
And as you were talking there, that puts me in mind of another peer that we network with at Tetribe meetings, where his speciality is taking Excel spreadsheets and that are effectively applications in disguise and making them proper applications. Like you mentioned, spreadsheets there is where we go to. It's not a database, it's a spreadsheet, But how many MSPs have clients that are so heavily reliant on spreadsheets that are totally not fit for the purpose that they're used? So perhaps it's not just legacy apps on a box covered in cobwebs. It's what people are doing today in office productivity tools.
Yeah, and the challenge I come up against, and MSPs should also, and their audiences should also be really aware of, is that continuum, if you like. Sorry, I'm a Star Trek fan, but you've got on one end, you've got off the shelf, it's ready made, and if it's SaaS, then you're just gonna rent on a subscription basis, low risk because you can cancel any time. But is it low risk? Because once you're embedded and then you try and move away in a year or two, you're really stuck. And then the other end is full bespoke, which typically has higher upfront capital costs, which at the time may present a larger risk. So, which one do you go for? And again, that's something that, audiences need to be sort of guided through that process to understand, over a 5-year period, what's going to be more costly, what's going to be fit for purpose. And, we come across spreadsheets all over the place. We use them for ourselves. And ultimately, there's, again, brilliant piece of kit, but they are highly flexible. They're often shared with many different people that can easily accidentally delete things. And yes, we have version history and revisions, which is fine. But then you've got the question is, are you even working on the right file and the right version of it? And, some companies put a lot of important data into these spreadsheets and rely on them. So, we always say, if machines are better at doing something, then let them do that. It really needs to be automated, freeing up the human mind, that sentience, that creativity and innovation that, while obviously recent media have sort of, talked a lot about what technology and obviously the buzzword of artificial intelligence, what it can do, is nowhere near at that sort of cognitive thinking level yet. So automate what you can and free up the human mind to do what you want. And recently, one of our clients had basically taken Excel as far as you can go. It was brilliant. The macros on this is almost a database and an application, everything unto itself. And it's calculating thermal enthalpy in refrigeration systems. The problem they had is there were so many calculations when they hit go, they had to run it overnight. And sometimes it still wasn't finished. And then you're wondering how they crashed, and that was really interesting. We created a web app in 3 weeks that replicated the calculations and the complexities there in a modern graphical user interface front end, your access via a browser, and the calculations were done in a couple of minutes as opposed to 9 hours.
Right, interesting. So we talked earlier about the tools and tactics that an MSP can employ to surface and then advance these opportunities. Would that be another workshop type approach? Could that be let's do an office productivity review and look at where you're misusing Excel, for example? And could that be the sort of work that an MSP could work with you or others on?
Oh, well, I mean, potentially. I think it's also horses for courses. So when MSPs are thinking about their client base, some of them are going to be prone towards innovation. Some of them are really excited by automating things and really trying to understand I'm paying 2 people's salary to do these jobs, but actually if I can automate 50% of it, then those 2 people are going to be so much more productive in what they're doing, particularly if those roles are client facing or in somehow sort of engaging with their onward customers, which improves relationships, improves customer retention. So you get business owners and directors that are really thinking, yeah, how can we best make use of technology? So if I was an MSP or an IT support company, I'd be thinking, which of my clients, doesn't have, 6 figures to throw at these things, but is kind of interested in what technology can do for them, what innovation could do for them. And maybe they do have a lot of spreadsheets, then yeah, but very low cost discovery or low cost workshops can just get to the root of things quite quickly. And a lot of the time, if we find together, and the MSPs are just as important in those workshops as well. It's we come together and say, don't do anything. It isn't worth the risk, or it's what you're trying to achieve, while maybe it's feasible, but is a much bigger, larger project that you might be thinking. So maybe don't go down that path. So it's really important to be authentic. Everybody wants happy clients as well. So you don't want to go down a path that's unlikely, but definitely, yeah, spreadsheets, and we're really talking about business processes, business operations, and business logic. And everybody does things their own different way. And if they are a little bit specialized, and if they do have unique processes, then they will probably be using tools like Excel or whatever it is in an unusual way. And it's not optimal. And the return for trying to automate these processes can be, 10x, 20x, and it's worth investing a small amount of money to explore that.
Right. Good. And well, we're nearly at time, maybe a little bit over budget, but some really interesting topics there, I think, and certainly some good actions as well in terms of how you can actually start to break this down into bite-sized, budgetable opportunities to work with the clients on, and de-risk for the MSP as well. So as always, been a pleasure talking to you. If any of our listeners want to carry on the conversation, how best do they get hold of you?
Yeah, feel free to contact me by email, ben@ccq.tech, TECH, or I'm on LinkedIn, Ben Lange, LANGE. And just lastly, if I could throw it in there, we have, I mentioned it once or twice, but a lot of people are super interested in what artificial intelligence and machine learning can do for them, whether it's generative AI or predictive analytics. And that's a really great use case for Discovery Picture. I'm sure MSPs and IT support companies are getting the questions, what can AI do for us? And, we're really at the forefront of some of these questions, and doing a lot of this, even with large corporates who have loads of developers, loads of skills, are looking for innovative companies to help them. And I think that's a good start for 10 as well.
Sounds like an opportunity for another episode there, Dan.
Absolutely, because every MSP has a client who knows someone at the pub who's using AI to make millions, and can do that for us to.
Indeed. In fact, I was just thinking, actually, if you went to university last year to do a software development course, in 3 years' time, when you come out of university, are your skills going to be obsolete? I mean, on the basis that universities are generally 5 to 10 years behind actually what's going on. Anyway, look, that's another question. That's another question for another episode, unless you can answer it in like 10 seconds.
Well, I would say that it's so new that the universities are the ones in the know. So actually, people coming out of university, while it is obsolete quite quickly, those are the people that you may want to scoop up.
Well, there we go. And on that bombshell.
Indeed. Thank you very much for your time, Ben.
Thank you, gentlemen. Real pleasure. Thank you for having me.